So in this video, I'm going to talk about one of the oldest topics human beings have been debating on. I have students sometimes will ask me about free will, and it's just always a very interesting conversation to get started. And I'm not sure we'll make any progress because I'm going to conclude with one option, and it's a very, very old one. But we see these movies, like there's a new one on Netflix, and they reflect a debate that has been going on for a very long time. And it seems like new neuroscience has given us a couple new things to look at, but it's just rearranged the problem. And so is it mind that makes up the brain's decision, or does the brain make up the mind's decision? Well, it's complex because we know a couple things from neuroscience. We know that experience rewires the brain, and this is something that happens on a continual basis. At least that's pretty solid from the research. That if you even go for if you go for a couple weeks, but even a couple days, say a 3 or 4 day retreat in meditation, you're going to come back with a different brain, and it's going to have new connections, and it have perhaps even a degree of neurogenesis. So we're creating new information processing cells, and we're rewiring the brain, and that's why they refer to it as brain plasticity, a term that is relatively new because we didn't realize how every experience we have reorganizes the brain. But then that asks the question, well, who decided to go on that retreat? Who decides to start meditating? You know, when you think about it, someone who's stuck in a cycle of life and poverty and drug abuse and surrounded by people making very poor decisions, you know, who decides to kind of break the cycle? When an addict just puts the drug away and stops using, what makes that decision? And that brings us to the second thing neuroscience is pretty solid with. We know from many different areas in neuroscience that the feeling of choice from the ego's perspective is an illusion. And this goes back to Benjamin Libet's work back in the 70s, where people would make simple decisions like, you know, when to press a button. And it would turn out that the brain made that decision first. And then they got the kind of egoic sense that they were in charge. And this was updated recently, where they had better equipment, fMRI chambers, and they were looking at people, again, making simple decisions. And it turns out the brain was deciding about 6 seconds before people got that ego sense of, oh, I'm in charge and I'm making this decision. So we know the brain decides first. So does that mean that the brain is always making these decisions? Well, then, you know, what's changing the brain? And if it's not environment, what is it? Well, there's an old idea from mythology. If you've ever read Joseph Campbell or the myth surrounding the hero, the hero, these heroic types that sort of break the mold and they break the cycle, they often have some type of help, some type of mentor. So for, like, you know, Luke, it was Obi-Wan. For Daniel, it was Mr. Miyagi, and you know, there's countless other examples. For some people, it's not even a person. So for some people, it's psychedelics. Psychedelics seems to open up that door of opportunity for them to maybe make a decision for the first time. But clearly, these are just helpers. You know, there's an old saying from the East that when the student is ready, the teacher appears. And so they're clearly in kind of an open the door, but you're going to walk through it. So what walks through it? Well, I'm going to lay a Shakespeare quote on you, and either, if you're a consciousness researcher, you either love this quote or you despise it. It seems like it doesn't really have any, you know, gray areas for people. So this comes from Shakespeare again. It's there are more things in heaven and earth, Horatio, than are dreamt of in your philosophy. And the nice thing about that saying is that, which is the saying, some people open up their chapters with that quote, because it is such a nice way of explaining the limitations of the thinking mind. In other words, there's a lot more to reality than what you think. And this might apply to understanding free will. In other words, when we conceptualize ourselves using the thing that conceptualizes, that is the thinking mind, we find this almost cartoon-like version of who we are, the ego. And that is one of the things that neuroscience has shown is absolutely an illusion. Well, what if there's actually more to who you are than who you think you are? What if we change that quote around a little bit, there's more to who you truly are than who you think you are? And now, of course, this is what I'm hinting at. This is where this video is going. So what's a very old term? Well, there's been one neuroscientist. There were a couple in the 70s that would reference the soul, but Ian McGilchrist is really the only modern neuroscientist that's, been brave enough to venture out and use this very old phrase to describe who we truly are. So we're not ego. Then we say, okay, well, what if we're a soul? So I'm very interested in your thoughts on this. So I've got about 700 or so subscribers, and a lot of you do watch these, and do you believe in a soul? And if you do, what is it? So McGilchrist is pretty, the way he talks about it in a video, a couple lectures of his, is I think the only way we can talk about it. It's that same way that Shakespeare puts it. Whatever we truly are is going to be far more than what we will ever understand. It's far more than what we can put into words and think and conceptualize. And therefore, the soul is always a mystery. But does that mean that everything that is a mystery isn't real? So, I don't know. Do you buy into a soul? Are you a soul? Because if we strip you from your ego, what's left? Be interested in your thoughts.